The air in the living room smelled like whiskey and resentment. My father's fist hit the mahogany table so hard the glasses rattled. I flinched but didn't look away. Enough. Thomas Turner's voice echoed off the walls. You contribute nothing to this family, Michael. You're useless. I stood there frozen while a dozen pairs of eyes burned into me. My siblings, their spouses, even my mother behind her folded hands. Nobody moved to defend me. Nobody ever did. My chest tightened. Dad, I was just trying to explain. Explain what? He cut me off with a wave of his hand. Another one of your ideas? We're running a business here, not a charity for dreamers. My sister Amanda let out a sharp laugh. Maybe you should find a family that actually wants you. The room erupted in murmurs and scattered laughter. I looked at each of them, one by one. These people who were supposed to be my family. My blood. Fine, I said quietly. You'll see. I walked out the door without another word. Behind me, someone made a joke. They were still laughing as I got into my car. My name is Michael Turner. I'm 29 years old, and I guess you could say I'm the disappointment of my family. The black sheep. The one who doesn't fit. That night, I drove back to my tiny apartment and started packing boxes. Not because I was planning to leave town. Because I knew everything was about to change. The Turners own a mid-sized construction company in Indiana. My grandfather started it, my father expanded it, and my older brother Sean was being groomed to take over. It was supposed to be a family legacy. I worked there for 6 years as a site supervisor. I was good at my job. I showed up early, stayed late, and never complained about the grunt work. But it was never enough for Thomas. When I told him I was quitting to start my own business, he laughed in my face. You'll be back within a month, begging for your job. That was 18 months ago. I hadn't been back since. Until tonight, when my mother called and said it was important. A family meeting, she said. Thomas wanted me there. I should have known it was a trap. The trouble started at Thanksgiving dinner 6 months before tonight. The whole family gathered around the table while Thomas carved the turkey. My brother Sean announced he'd landed a contract worth $3 million. Everyone clapped. Thomas raised his glass. That's my boy. That's a real contribution to this family. Then he turned to me. And what about you, Michael? Still playing inventor in that warehouse? I kept my voice steady. I'm developing sustainable housing. Modular eco-homes that. Eco-homes. Thomas snorted. You mean those toy houses nobody wants to buy? Amanda joined in. How much money have you made so far? Oh wait, let me guess. 0. My younger brother Kyle laughed. Maybe you should get a real job before you starve. I forced a smile and excused myself from the table. My mother followed me to the kitchen and touched my arm. Don't listen to them, sweetheart. But her eyes were sad. She knew as well as I did that my father would never see me as anything but a failure. I drove home that night with white knuckles on the steering wheel. The warehouse was cold and empty when I got back. Peeling paint on the walls, broken windows covered with plastic sheets, concrete floors that hurt my feet after long days of standing. But it was mine. Every cracked wall and rusted beam belonged to me. I spread my blueprints across a folding table and studied them under a camping lantern. The design was simple but revolutionary. Modular panels that locked together, made from recycled materials and insulated with biofoam. Easy to build, easy to transport, affordable for families who couldn't get traditional mortgages. My air mattress sat in the corner next to a space heater that barely worked. Some nights I could see my breath in the air. But I didn't care. Every cold night, every skipped meal, every dollar I scraped together brought me closer to finishing the prototype. I sketched adjustments until 3 in the morning. Then I lay down on that air mattress and stared at the ceiling. This was going to work. It had to work. Because I'd already burned every bridge behind me. 2 weeks before the family meeting, I drove to my parents' house with a laptop and a folder of projections. I'd finally finished the prototype. I had numbers, photos, even preliminary interest from a few community development programs. I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe Thomas would finally see that I wasn't just wasting my time. The whole family was there. Sean and Amanda, Kyle and his wife Bridget, my father at the head of the table. I set up my presentation on the dining room table. This is the final design, I said, pulling up photos on my laptop. Each unit costs $12,000 to build and can be assembled in 3 days. The market research shows. Thomas held up his hand. Stop. Just stop. He leaned forward and jabbed his finger at my screen. These numbers are fantasy. You think you can undercut established builders with some glorified shed. Sean laughed. Who's going to buy these? Poor people? Good luck collecting payments. They are for families who can't afford traditional homes, I said. Single mothers, veterans, people, charity cases. Thomas stood up, his face red. You're embarrassing yourself, son. This conversation is over. That's when he said it. The words that finally broke me. You're useless. My savings ran out 2 weeks after that meeting. I'd been surviving on ramen noodles and crackers for months already, but now I couldn't even afford that. The power company shut off my electricity. My car got repossessed because I'd missed 3 payments. I slept in the warehouse office with a space heater running on borrowed power from the building next door. The landlord issued an eviction notice. I had 30 days to come up with rent or he'd lock the doors. At night, I lay on that deflating air mattress and stared at the ceiling. Sometimes I wondered if my father was right. If I really was useless. If I should just give up and crawl back to Turner Construction and beg for my old job. But then I'd look at the prototype sitting in the corner. The walls I'd built with my own hands. The dream I'd refused to let die. I couldn't quit now. Not after everything I'd sacrificed. Not after burning every bridge and losing every safety net. So I tightened my belt, drank more water to fill my stomach, and kept working. Frank Delaney walked into my warehouse on a Tuesday afternoon looking for scrap wood. He was in his 60s, wearing coveralls and work boots that had seen better days. You using that pile of 2x4s? He asked, pointing to the corner. Yeah, I need those, I said. Sorry. He nodded and started to leave, then stopped. He was staring at my prototype. You build that? I did. He walked over and ran his hand along the panels. Checked the seams. Tested the joints. Modular design. Yeah. Sustainable materials, quick assembly, affordable price point. Frank studied it for a long time. Then he looked at me. You know who I am? I shook my head. I'm the engineer your father fired 15 years ago for questioning his safety protocols. He smiled. Thomas Turner is a stubborn fool. But you might not be. He came back the next day with a toolbox. And the day after that. And the day after that. Frank became the mentor I never had. The father figure who actually believed in me. Under Frank's guidance, I rebuilt the prototype from scratch. We failed over and over. Leaks in the roof. Poor insulation. Warped panels that wouldn't fit together properly. Each failure felt like proof that my father was right. That I was wasting my time. That I should have stayed at Turner Construction and accepted my role as the family disappointment. But Frank never gave up. Failure is just information, he said. Now we know what doesn't work. Tomorrow we try something new. We worked 16-hour days. Frank taught me engineering principles I'd never learned. How to calculate load-bearing capacity. How to design proper drainage systems. How to seal joints that would survive Indiana winters. Slowly, the prototype improved. The leaks stopped. The panels fit perfectly. The insulation kept the interior warm even on cold nights. 3 months after Frank walked into my warehouse, we had something that actually worked. Something people might actually want to buy. Now you need capital, Frank said. You need to prove this can scale. I applied for a small business loan the next day. The bank manager smiled politely as I laid out my business plan. I showed her photos of the prototype, market research, financial projections. Everything looked solid. She reviewed my application while I sat there sweating in my only clean shirt. Finally, She looked up. Mr. Turner, I have to be honest with you. Your father called us yesterday. My stomach dropped. What? He warned us that you're unreliable, that you have a history of abandoned projects and poor judgment. She closed the folder. I'm sorry, but we can't approve your loan. I sat there stunned. My own father had sabotaged me, called ahead to make sure I couldn't get funding. Thank you for your time, I said quietly. I walked out of the bank and sat in my car for 20 minutes. My hands were shaking. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. This was a new low, even for Thomas. I drove back to the warehouse in silence, my jaw tight, my chest burning with something that felt like rage but colder. I was measuring panels the next afternoon when someone knocked on the warehouse door. I looked up and saw Veronica Kim standing there with blueprints under her arm. Veronica and I grew up together. We'd been friends since elementary school, back before my life became complicated. Now she worked as a city planner for the town of Riverside, about 40 miles south. I heard about your project, she said. Can I see it? I showed her the prototype. She walked through it slowly, taking notes, asking questions about cost and timeline and materials. This is exactly what we need, she said finally. Riverside is doing a redevelopment project. We need affordable housing for low-income families. If you can deliver 3 units by spring, I can get you the contract. I stared at her. Are you serious? Dead serious. It's only $15,000 per unit, but it's a start. And if these work, we'll need 20 more by next year. I wanted to hug her. Instead, I shook her hand and tried not to cry. Thank you, Veronica. You have no idea what this means. She smiled. Just build something great, Michael. I won the contract 3 days later. $15,000 for 3 units, plus materials. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. Frank and I worked around the clock. We built during the day and planned at night. My siblings heard about the project through the family grapevine. Amanda called it a pity project. Sean told people I was building glorified sheds for poor people. Let them talk, Frank said. Actions speak louder than words. We framed the first unit in 2 weeks. The panels locked together perfectly. The roof was watertight. The solar panels Frank helped me install provided enough power for lights and heating. When the first unit was finished, Veronica brought the town council to inspect it. They walked through in silence, checking every corner, testing every switch. Finally, the council president nodded. This is impressive work, Mr. Turner. We'll take all 3. I shook his hand and waited until they left before I let myself smile. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't useless after all. We were installing the roof panels on the second unit when the scaffold collapsed. Frank was 12 feet up when the support beam gave way. I watched in horror as he fell backward and hit the ground hard. Frank! I ran to him. He was conscious, but his leg was bent at a terrible angle. I called 911 and rode with him in the ambulance. At the hospital, they told me he'd broken his femur and 3 ribs. He'd need surgery and months of physical therapy. The medical bills were crushing. Frank didn't have insurance. The surgery alone cost $30,000. I sat in the waiting room with my head in my hands. Without Frank, I couldn't finish the project. Without finishing the project, I'd lose the contract. Without the contract, I'd lose everything. When Frank woke up after surgery, I was sitting beside his bed. We'll figure this out, I told him. He squeezed my hand. You're going to be fine, kid. You don't need me anymore. But we both knew that wasn't true. I drove to my parents' house the next day. I hadn't been back since the family meeting. My mother answered the door and her face crumpled when she saw me. Michael, sweetheart, what's wrong? I told her about Frank's accident. About the medical bills. About the contract I was going to lose because I couldn't finish the work alone. She listened with tears in her eyes. Let me talk to your father. No. I shook my head. I'm not asking for his help. I'm asking for yours. She disappeared into the house and came back 10 minutes later with an envelope. Inside was $5,000 in cash. "This is my own money," she whispered. "Your father doesn't know about it. Please don't tell him." I tried to give it back. "Mom, I can't." "Yes, you can." She pressed the envelope into my hands. "I should have stood up for you a long time ago. This is the least I can do." I hugged her and tried not to cry. "Thank you." As I drove away, I saw my father watching from the upstairs window. His face was unreadable. I sold everything I owned. My laptop, my tools, even my grandfather's watch. I took side jobs doing construction work for other companies. I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Frank recovered slowly. He couldn't work, but he could advise. He sat in a lawn chair next to the build site and told me what to do next. Tighten that corner. Check the level. Don't rush the wiring. It took 3 months, but I finished all 3 units by hand. Every nail, every panel, every window installed by myself. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony arrived, I stood back and watched families move into homes I'd built. A single mother with 2 kids. A veteran in a wheelchair. An elderly couple who'd been living in their car. They thanked me with tears in their eyes. They said I'd saved their lives. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely proud of something I'd done. A local news crew showed up at the ribbon cutting. They interviewed the families, filmed the houses, and asked me about my vision. I just wanted to prove that affordable housing doesn't have to mean low quality, I said. Everyone deserves a safe, comfortable place to live. The segment aired 2 nights later. A new hope for small-town housing, they called it. The clip went viral on social media. By morning, my phone was ringing non-stop. Investors wanted to talk. Other towns wanted to know if I could replicate the project. Architecture blogs wrote articles about the design. My inbox filled with messages from people asking how much a unit cost, how long it took to build, whether I could ship nationwide. Frank called me from his hospital bed. "Kid, you did it. You actually did it." I sat in my warehouse that night and cried. Not from sadness. From relief. From exhaustion. From the overwhelming realization that I'd been right all along. The dream wasn't dead. It was just getting started. 2 weeks later, my father called. His voice was different. Softer. Almost friendly. "Michael, I think we should talk. Come to dinner Sunday night." I knew exactly what this was. Now that I had success, now that I was getting attention, suddenly he wanted to reconcile. Suddenly I was worth his time. But I went anyway, because I wanted to see his face when I told him no. The whole family was there. Amanda and Sean, Kyle and Bridget, my mother looking nervous. Everyone acted polite. Interested. Like they hadn't spent years mocking me. So, Thomas said over dessert, "Tell us about this housing project." I kept my answers short. Professional. I didn't give them details they could use. After dinner, Thomas pulled me aside into his study. "I've been thinking," he said. "What you're doing is impressive. And I think there's an opportunity here for both of us." Here it comes, I thought. Thomas leaned back in his leather chair and folded his hands. Turner Construction has the infrastructure, the reputation, the resources. You have this innovative design. What if we merged our operations? Merged, I repeated. We'd build your houses under the Turner brand. You'd get a percentage of profits. 10%, let's say. And you'd be back in the family business where you belong. I looked at him for a long moment. At the man who'd called me useless. Who'd sabotaged my loan application. Who'd spent years making me feel worthless. "No," I said. His smile faltered. "No. I'm not for sale, Dad. And neither is my company." I stood up and walked to the door. Thomas followed me, his voice rising. "You're making a mistake, Michael. You need us. You need our connections, our experience." "I needed you when I was sleeping on an air mattress," I said. "I needed you when I couldn't afford food. Where were you then?" He had no answer. I left without saying goodbye to anyone else. 3 days later, A shipment of materials for my next project went missing. I'd ordered special panels from a supplier in Ohio. They were supposed to arrive Tuesday morning. By Thursday, they still hadn't shown up. I called the supplier. They said the shipment had been rerouted. Someone called claiming to be from my company and changed the delivery address. Who called? I asked. A Sean Turner. Said he was your business partner. My brother. Of course. I tracked down the shipment. It had been delivered to a Turner construction job site on the other side of town. When I showed up to collect it, the site manager claimed he'd never seen it. I took photos, documented everything, got statements from the delivery driver. But I didn't confront Sean. Not yet. I just filed the documentation away and ordered replacement materials. Frank called me that night. They're scared of you now. That's why they're fighting dirty. Let them fight, I said. I'm not stopping. The first cracks in Turner Construction appeared 2 months later. Rumors started spreading through the industry. Financial problems. Accounting irregularities. Clients pulling contracts. I heard it through the grapevine first. Then from Veronica, who heard it from other city planners. Then from suppliers who said Turner Construction was late on payments. My mother called me one night, crying. Your father is under investigation. The IRS is asking questions about the company's taxes. Michael, what's happening? I don't know, Mom. But I had suspicions. Years of cutting corners. Years of dodging regulations. Years of Thomas running the company like his personal piggy bank. It was all catching up with him now. I focused on my own work. My next project was bigger. 12 units for a town in Illinois. Then 20 units for a housing nonprofit in Michigan. The orders kept coming. I stayed quiet and let Turner Construction collapse under its own weight. 6 months after leaving that family dinner, I was invited to speak at the National Sustainable Housing Conference in Chicago. 2,000 people in the audience. Architects, engineers, investors, journalists. I stood on that stage and told my story. I didn't name my father or Turner Construction. I just talked about starting with nothing. About sleeping in a warehouse. About the people who believed in me when nobody else did. Affordable housing isn't charity, I said. It's a human right. And if we're willing to innovate, willing to challenge the status quo, we can build a future where everyone has a safe place to live. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, investors lined up to talk. I exchanged business cards with executives from major construction firms. A woman from a housing nonprofit offered to partner on a project in Detroit. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests. I flew home that night and looked out the airplane window at the lights below. Somewhere down there, my father was watching his empire crumble. I didn't feel happy about it. Just tired. The end came faster than anyone expected. A whistleblower leaked documents to the state attorney general. Years of unpaid taxes. Fraudulent insurance claims. Bribery payments to building inspectors. Turner Construction filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks later. My mother called me in tears. Your father is devastated. The company is gone, Michael. Everything your grandfather built is gone. I wanted to feel vindicated. I wanted to feel like justice had been served. Instead, I just felt empty. That night, Sean called me drunk. This is your fault, he slurred. You and your stupid eco-houses. You made Dad look bad. I didn't do anything, I said. He did this to himself. We were fine until you came along. I hung up. The family was imploding. Amanda wasn't speaking to Kyle. Sean blamed everyone but himself. My mother was caught in the middle, trying to hold together something that was already shattered. And me? I just kept building houses. Thomas called me at 2 in the morning. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Michael. His voice cracked. I need your help, son. I sat up in bed. What's wrong? The company. The bankruptcy. I'm losing everything. The house, the savings, everything. I waited. I know I wasn't always fair to you, he continued. I know I said things I shouldn't have said. But you're my son. And I'm asking you to help me save the family business. My father, Thomas Turner. The man who'd called me useless. Who'd sabotaged my loan. Who'd kicked me out of a family meeting. Now he was begging. I'll meet with you, I said. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I hung up before he could respond. Frank called me an hour later. He'd heard about Thomas's call through my mother. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know yet, I said. But it's time to end this. We met in a conference room at a lawyer's office. Thomas sat across from me looking 20 years older. Gray-faced. Defeated. His lawyer sat beside him with a folder of documents. Thank you for coming, Thomas said quietly. I didn't respond. His lawyer laid out the situation. Turner Construction was bankrupt. Creditors were circling. The only way to save anything was to sell the company to someone who could absorb the debt and restructure. We're asking if you'd consider buying the company, the lawyer said. You'd get the Turner name, the remaining contracts, the equipment. In exchange, you'd assume the debts and pay a settlement to the creditors. I looked at my father. He couldn't meet my eyes. How much? I asked. 200,000. I had that much now. Barely. It would wipe out most of my savings. I'll do it, I said. But I have conditions. Thomas looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. The company name changes. No more Turner Construction. We call it Arden Homes. Arden. Thomas frowned. Mom's maiden name, I said. I'm not saving your name, Dad. I'm saving hers. 1 month later, the paperwork was final. Arden Homes owned everything that used to be Turner Construction. The equipment, the contracts, the office building. I called a family meeting. The first one since Thomas had kicked me out. Everyone showed up. Sean and Amanda, Kyle and Bridget, my parents. They sat around the same mahogany table where this had all started. I bought the company, I said. Which means I'm now your employer. And I have some things to say. Thomas tried to interrupt. I held up my hand. When you called me useless, I believed it for a long time. I thought maybe you were right. Maybe I was wasting my time. Maybe I should have just accepted my place in this family and kept my mouth shut. The room was silent. But you taught me something important. You taught me that you don't have to inherit pride to build purpose. You taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when things get hard. I looked at each of them. Sean, Amanda, Kyle, you're welcome to interview for positions at Arden Homes. But you'll earn your jobs like everyone else. Then I turned to my father. And you, Dad. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. Because I deserve to move on. For the first time in my life, Thomas Turner lowered his head. Christmas morning arrived 6 months later. I hosted dinner in my new house. A real house this time. Not a warehouse. Not an air mattress on concrete. A proper home with rooms and furniture and a kitchen that worked. Frank was there with his daughter. Veronica brought her husband. A few employees from Arden Homes sat around the table laughing and sharing stories. My mother arrived late, carrying a pie she'd baked. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Through the window, I saw my father standing in the snow. He'd been there for 10 minutes, just looking at the house. Not coming closer. Not leaving either. I walked to the door and opened it. "You can come in if you're ready to listen," I said. He nodded slowly. "I'm ready." He stepped inside, brushing snow off his shoulders. The man who'd once kicked me out of a family meeting was now walking into my home. On my terms. In my house. We sat down together at the table. I poured him coffee. He looked around at the faces of people who'd supported me when he didn't. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me another chance." I nodded. "Merry Christmas, Dad." Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, something that felt like peace finally settled over us. The ultimate revenge wasn't destruction. It was dignity, success, and the freedom to extend grace on my own terms.